Varying pace within your story will help to retain readers' attention, whilst injecting tension and urgency into the more exciting parts of your work. But does pace come from the structure you create for your story, or can it be added as you edit? And will Rachel Knightley and Emily Inkpen agree on the answer? Welcome to the Writer's Gym. The Writer's Gym podcast. Build creative confidence and grow your writing life with Rachel Knightley and Emily Inkpen. Rachel Knightley, Emily Inkpen.
Hello.
Welcome back to the Writer's Gym podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, yeah.
Now,
Also welcome back.
Well, thank you.
Chris Gregory.
Now, I have a plan in front of me for this episode because we
Good
are
Lord.
talking about structure and pace, or pace and structure, whichever way around.
Mm-hmm.
And my first question is this. Is structure the enabler of pace, or does pace come into your story some other way?
So I would say theoretically, structure is the enabler of pace. So in theory, you want your story to ramp up steadily in tension from sort of beginning to end. And I've got a good example of this. I've just been binging Lord of the Rings, so it was, it's inevitable, really, that I would bring something up from this. But, okay, so a lot of people say that The Two Towers is their favourite of the trilogy. And it's not very hard to see why, because pace-wise, it is excellent. The transition keeps growing until you've got two wars going on. I should say two battles, not two wars. So one at Helm's Deep, one with the Ents in Isengard, which is so beautifully done because you don't really know it's going to happen until it does. And all of this at the climax of the story is interspersed with moments with Frodo and Sam, where Sam gets that amazing monologue about the great stories, which provides enough of a breather to give the viewer a bird's eye view on what's happening in the other parts of the world and the tension that's being experienced there and the sort of wider significance of that. And it's just very beautifully done and executed. And people sort of say the Two Towers is the best movie of the three. And structure-wise, I can't fault that. I can't fault that at all.
Yeah. And the particular moment that you described there is all born of the structure of the story, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So the work that we've done to that point, and the planning that Tolkien has done.
Oh, well, Tolkien actually, because at the end of Two Towers in the novels, Frodo and Sam are also facing Shelob. But we don't see that because the storylines don't run concurrently. So the Shelob section is the sort of pinnacle of Frodo and Sam's journey in, I think, part 3. And then Helm's Deep is the pinnacle of the story with the others in book 4. And I think the Merry Pippin side of things with Treebeard is told retrospectively. So it was really the movie and the translation into script format that did that so well. So, in terms of pace, I think that's very much on the script writers.
And there's probably a whole different conversation about structuring a film or drama based on a book when you take a different structure. But I think
absolutely,
we probably won't go too far down that.
No, that's a rabbit hole.
But what do you think, Rachel, around pace coming from structure?
I was thinking, listening to Emily say that it can be very different from the reader-viewer experience end of things to the writer end of things. So listening to that, what I would not want someone to take is, right, I have to structure the whole thing before I start writing it, it won't have pace, which of course is not what we're saying at all. When you are writing it, depending on what kind of structure level you are comfortable or you enjoy writing early, that's very different for different people. So, I mean, I've got one client at the Writer's Gym who I waved a magic wand for her the other day. We talk about this online for the Green Ink sponsored Write for Macmillan Cancer Support. We were talking about how the trick we did with her was wave the magic wand. What if, because never tell your brain it's real, or your brain says I'm not playing anymore. What if there's no such thing as plot and structure for the entirety of your first draft? And I saw her shoulders release, and I saw her start to enjoy writing again, because when we are not enjoying something, we start doing a real writer would be really good at this bit, or would do it like this kind of carousel. And we got her off that carousel and back onto her quest, her, forgive me Chris, journey. We've all got a word we hate, and I'm sorry, because I completely respect why that's yours. But she started moving forward again with her work and playing, enjoying it again. And so my point is, for some people, pace and structure are not dancing partners, but for some people they are.
Yes.
And bear in mind that the eventual product that you read or watch and how it was written are not the same thing, and every writer finds what works for them. So what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss different ways that can happen.
Yes.
But it's all about finding your own.
I mean, to be honest, the Two Towers screenplay was probably not at the draft 1 stage when it went to cinema.
You'd hope.
I'm going to say.
You'd hope.
So, you know.
There are exceptions to that rule, but...
What colour was it, though? Because we talked about different colours, didn't we, for screenplay drafts?
Oh, God, yeah.
We'll go back and try and identify and put it in the
well,
put it in the
there
show
would have been
notes if we
different
find
scenes that were different colours.
Yeah,
that's the
of
thing. In
course.
movies, that's always the case. But yeah, definitely, they probably did not get that pacing first time around.
Yes.
There is definitely a play phase.
Well, we often think of pace as referring specifically to the fast bits of the story, don't we? But really, I think pace is, something that can actually refer to all of the story and what speed is it moving at.
There's a useful thing.
Yeah.
Sorry to leap. There's a useful thing in directing that I expect you've both used at some point, but is very, very common in audio and theatre and stage and screen, which is not dropping the ball. The sense of what pace is, and when you're rehearsing something, the way that you keep a sense of momentum is, have I left that pause so long that the ball has just flopped between the two people speaking onto the floor? And it's not something that you can do mathematically, but it's absolutely something that you can feel. And for me, it's all about that. It's all about the world continuing. It's the same way that a plane or bird flies. It's the same way a group of people have a conversation. And you've experienced it at parties when there's an uncomfortable silence, or you've experienced it at a job interview where time might be feeling like it's moving really slowly for you while you desperately think of the next answer. And it's a sense of what time is doing and what you need time to do in that scene. So whether you're directing or writing, feeling that stretch between the characters. Are you dropping the ball? Another one I use in my head is swinging to the next branch. You have to stay mid-air enough to get to the next branch.
Yes.
If you're just hanging there, you can't reach the next branch anymore.
Yeah, good point.
That for me is pace.
I would say all of that is absolutely true. I mean, I would say that it's all pacing, and often you need the slower parts of the story to let the reader or listener breathe amidst the fast-paced craziness. Some of the best moments are in between stretches of high tension, when two characters just sit for 5 minutes and talk about what the hell just happened. And I think to use your analogy of dropping the ball, in those moments, someone just holds on to the ball for a little minute and just holds the ball. And as long as in those moments what they're talking about is relevant and meaningful with regards to what just happened and potentially what is about to happen, as long as that's the case, you are still well on track. But the quietness of a moment like that, or the significance of a moment like that, because when you're in the middle of action, you're not necessarily getting the significance. The action can be very exciting and everything, but the significance of what's going on, you don't have time to sort of get to that.
The impact of it.
The impact, of it. You don't get to. But if you don't show the impact, if you don't have moments of, that just happened, wow, or, I am now not okay, or I am now okay. Any of those moments, if you don't have that, then pacing-wise, sometimes it gets tense and tense and tense, and the listener or the reader or the viewer needs a moment to acknowledge what's happened before we crack on. And that's what I would call holding the ball.
Yes.
And then passing it to somebody else.
So are we saying then that the right pace is about the storytelling in general, and it's, you know, every scene, every little episode within your story will have its right pace?
And as with real life, it gets boring if it's one note. There are different sides to your personality. There are different moods to your day. It is about continuing. So momentum doesn't work if it's just one style, one pace, one anything. It is all about those fast and slow bits. It is having a sense. Like I said, it's not something you can do mathematically. Yes, you can map it, you know, for some of us maybe afterwards. You can impose that and work out what it needs, yes. But those instincts do come to a writer, and the more you do it, the more practice you get, as with anything.
Yes.
The more you'll think, oh yes, it's instinctive, but yes, I completely appreciate things get, ironically, more instinctive the more you do them.
Yeah. And I think, so this next question, I think you've both kind of answered it in part, I think. But I want to think of, you know, now applying pace practically for a writer. So how can writers use pace to attract and maintain a reader's attention and maintain interest through a story? Is it by varying the pace, as I think you've both suggested?
This is feeling like a one-word answer from me for once, which is yes. It is about varying it. It's about not looking for how should I do this right. The how should I do this right comes once you've got something and you're improving it, when you find what it needs once it exists. But at first it's curiosity that's going to get you there. It's listening to what the characters are doing in your head, getting it out of your head and onto the page so that you can then start tweaking.
Yes. I was just going to say that I think there's something, though, about it being pace being appropriate and believable. And we've talked about examples before in a drama where in the heat of a battle, suddenly a character starts to talk about their feelings and that's that
really
just doesn't. And so what the writer's probably doing there is thinking, well, I've had a lot of fast-paced action. I'm going to have some more. I just need to slow it down a little bit.
Yeah, when you inject it and it's completely unbelievable, it's not fun.
Beautiful example, relevance to be determined later. The final episode and the final scene just before they go over the top in Blackadder Goes Forth.
Oh, yeah.
Where, the war must have stopped. It's gone quiet. Hooray. And they tell you what date it is and you know that the war is going to end, just not quite now. And they start to go, oh, brilliant, yeah. And it absolutely adds to what's about to happen. So and the feelings, and the lines are actually, sir, yes, Lieutenant, I'm scared, sir.
Yeah.
I don't want to die.
Yeah.
Not terribly keen on dying at all, actually. And the humour and the mood and the acknowledgement of feelings just before they go over. I mean, yes, there's lots of other things.
I would say that's just before, though, not in the middle.
Yeah.
They don't get into the middle of no man's land and then go, you know what, I don't.
You know what? Let's have a coaching session. No, they didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would say that is a moment of leveraging a beautiful moment just on the cusp of the action.
Yes.
And I would say, okay, so the temptation is to grab people and just run with the action.
But don't do something completely anti-human nature, such as when there is, and I am exaggerating, an arrow coming straight for your head to say, do you know, this reminds me of the time when I was 6 and my father...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think one of the things about sort of pace, which is really interesting to me, fascinating to me, in fact, in the world of audio drama, is that the slow burns are real in audio drama, and listeners do find them captivating. And listeners do stick around for the slow build. And in movies, we're losing that. Even in books, with the cost of paper rising, word counts being compressed down in terms of what is considered a publishable novel, especially for early authors and things like that. The slow burn, we don't have much space for it anymore. There's not very much sort of room for a slow burn. But in audio drama, listeners are really here for it. It's really weird in that it weirds me out because I'm quite a heavy action narrative writer, but you know, there are audio dramas out there, I'm not going to name any, the episodes are an hour long each. And you see on forums people saying, oh yeah, well, it takes a good 3 episodes for it to really get going. And you're like, that is 3 hours of meh before we get to, okay, this is getting good now. And I'm like, people complain about the length of the Lord of the Rings director's cut. And yet they're perfectly prepared to put 3 hours into meh. It's getting there. And that amazes me. That just absolutely amazes me.
Rachel, what
Hello.
techniques might a writer use to inject some pace into a chapter or passage that maybe is feeling a little flat? So I'm going to say a few little things now and sort of say, I was going to say nod, but that's not very good for the radio, is it? So things like snappy dialogue, urgent dialogue, shorter sentences, shorter words.
Okay,
more rapid
that's a
scene
beautiful,
transitions.
beautiful shopping list. The crucial thing is to understand that what you can do is edit what you've already written. And yes, that is where all of those decisions come in. You will have a gem of an idea, and the image in my head is of dusting off the ammonite you found on the beach, that you have something. And people worry when they see that their idea isn't coming through, that they need to do more. Quite often what you need to do is you need to do less. It is about taking away all of the gunk that is on there. A term that was used a lot by one of my old writing teachers, Naomi Wood, was scaffolding. That you can take the scaffolding away once the building is up. I don't know why I'm seeing an ammonite in my head, but I am, and I'm going to stay with that image for now, which is that there is so much that you think might be part of this that actually when it goes, when you're ready to just try and make those sacrifices, what's left is snappy dialogue. What's left is, I won't go through the list because you've just said the list, but all of the things that you just said, Chris, are what's left when we take away. It's brevity, it's clarity, it's emotional truth. It's usually already there. And when you take all that stuff away, even if those things that are left that you do want do need a bit of tweaking, you only tweak them correctly because you can see them clearly.
Yeah, I see. I think it's sort of like when things are really pacey in life, you don't have time for moments of poetic reflection. You don't have time for run-on sentences. You don't have time for
Saying beautifully why it's beautiful. You just look at the beauty.
You just go,
live it.
There's a thing there, there's a thing there, there's a thing there. What's the most important thing to me right now? That is, like it's observational, it's stark. And as soon as you get to the essence of what it is, that's when the pace picks up. And you're cutting away the excess. Because when you go out for a walk in the countryside, you have time to be thinking about wide open vistas and the blue of the sky and the slant of the shadows and all of those things. When you are running across a field because you're being chased by a farm animal of some description, you are not thinking the slant of the tree, the slant of the light on the grass is absolutely fantastic right now. No, you are probably doing a whole string of swear words in your head and just existing in that moment. So it's about sort of cutting that back. If we're talking about how to make it pacey, that's all very mechanical. If you want devices that you can put into a story to up pace and tension, give people a deadline.
Yeah.
Also, as well as the deadline, I think the almost elephant in the room of what we've both said there is what you do is you do make it shorter. You do make those heartbeat style. So the reason most swear words are one syllable is because those are how our heartbeat going faster. It is shorter sentences. We have heartbeat thoughts and feelings, and making urgent sound and feel urgent is shorter, not longer.
Yeah.
So you can. That's something that I realise is probably worth saying, is that long, beautiful sentences that would have got you an A in your descriptive piece at GCSE, if what's going on in your scene is that people are in urgent mode, that's not the style in which humans do urgent. So it's about fitting style to substance.
Yeah.
I have an image in my head now of Emily being chased across a field by a bull or a wild boar or something.
Jeez, a wild boar. Where do you think I am in the world?
And an interesting point there, I think we've talked about pace coming from the structure and the plan of a piece.
Yeah.
But I think pace also from the edit as well, as going back to the point that you made.
And as I was saying, give people a deadline. There is a bomb that's about to go off. There is a thing that you need to do before here, otherwise that won't happen. You have to get a message to that person, otherwise catastrophe. Like, up the stakes. And instantly, as soon as you cut the time in half that people have got, you might be thinking, I want in the story for this to happen within a week. Well, the reader isn't necessarily going to know that at the time. Have something in the story that says we have a week to do this thing otherwise, and suddenly you've got pace, you have got stakes, you've got all these things.
And it can be, I wouldn't have done this for me as a character, but I would have done this for you. And then when somebody else has got involvement in what needs to be done, suddenly that urgency feels more real to the writer, that if you've given them something that isn't just for them, it's for somebody else they care about, something else they care about. E.g., Emily is running across this field, and carrying the one remaining delete where applicable in this world, and she's got to get it to the person over there. Or everybody, including the bull that's chasing her, will be dead because the world will get wiped out.
And I care about the bull.
And you do care about the bull. You're doing this for the bull, but the bull is still chasing you.
It doesn't know that, but it can't be blamed. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
#vegan.
When might it be important to reduce the pace, and are there techniques for doing this?
Yeah, I would say definitely, especially in the aftermath. Or just before the final push, like you mentioned with Blackadder. Give your characters a moment to say, shit, what just happened? And I was chatting to Charlie Richards, who plays Ren in The Dex Legacy, and I asked him what was the most significant scene of season 2, in his opinion. And he said it's when the kids are underneath the manhole in the underground tunnels that they've been running through for ages, and they're about to go up, and they know that people are going to be waiting for them. They know that they're potentially at the end of the road, and they know that their chase is reaching a crux point, and they take a moment to acknowledge this. And it's sort of like are we going to kill people here? Are we going to run? Are we going to fight? Let's get this straight now. Acknowledge that this is the moment they need to have this conversation, ride or die. So I've read books where the author didn't include the oh shit moments, and it reduced the impact of what was going on because you need to make space for them, and that is essential. It's about consequences. It's about acknowledging the reader is with you on this journey. The reader is with you, in the story, and the reader is feeling things at this point. Take a moment to acknowledge the feelings of the character and the reader. What the reader is supposed to be feeling, and then move on. Acknowledge those things.
Give us time to think, give us time to feel. If there was one thing that society could do with remembering, it's that, our lives get so busy, we don't make time around things. And what you hear in so many situations from people is, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time, and that isn't sustainable. And if that's true in life, it's certainly true in art. You need to make time around things to feel, to be present when they happen.
Yeah.
And that applies in your fiction to your characters as much as it does to you as a creator.
Exactly, yeah.
In this world.
It's absolutely the same thing,
Yeah.
So I want to move on next, and this is very much a nod to the structuring side of this discussion.
Yeah.
To something, Emily, that I'm sure it's not your original idea, but it's something that you have developed in the time I've known you, in the time you've been working on The Dex Legacy and other dramas. And that is a sort of heat map that shows the peaks and troughs, as it were, in terms of pace within
and
a
action.
story.
Yeah, so this was something I did actually come up with it independently, and then I found out that I'm not the only writer who has come up with it independently. So it would be inaccurate to say it wasn't an original idea, but at the same time I'm not the only one to have had that original idea, if you know what I mean. I didn't get it from anyone else. But it was at the end of writing my first novel, which I completely just did. I vomit drafted it, and I just got to the end. I was so scared that I would never finish this thing, so that I just blinkers on ran for it. And at the end of it, I needed to take a step back and look at it and think, okay, what do I have here? And I really needed to extrapolate what how I saw that, how I viewed it. And the best way for me to do that was through a visual representation of the chapters and how much action is going on in each. So what I came up with, which is sometimes known, I now know, as the traffic light system, is you've got green for easy, not particularly, easy scenes, not very high tension. I go yellow for stepping it up, amber for stepping it up further, red for hot tension, battle scenes, arguments.
Yeah.
Very key, heavy moments. And I go back through what I've written and I do a chapter list, and then I put the colour on the chapter and say, okay, this is a high tension chapter, this is a thing. And then from that, you can see roughly what your levels of tension are through the book. And in the novels that I wrote, normally there was this very, very lovely sweep from sort of green, predominantly green, up to predominantly red, with the sort of occasional green chapter in the red bit, from what we've been saying about, pace and everything. And the occasional red bit peppered throughout as the stakes are sort of foreshadowed throughout the story, but really a sweep from green to red. And that is something that I apply retrospectively, which goes with what we were saying about not bogging yourself down with the technicalities before you've got a first draft out. You can do these things. You can get that bird's eye view of what you have already written as a sort of, I'm going to apply this, what have I got?
Yes.
And obviously in the time that we've known each other, with audio drama, I'm more of a planner. Wasn't the case in season 1. By necessity, we don't talk about that. I still have PTSD. By season 3, I did like a full plan, scene by scene, of each episode. And you could definitely track the colour of those scenes and the colour of the episodes even throughout the series. And it really helps. But I don't plan novels in the same way. I don't do that scene by scene. I don't do that chapter by chapter.
Well, the ending of a chapter isn't as momentous a moment as the ending of an episode in an audio drama, is it?
No, exactly.
We do, by necessity, want to do something that gets people to tune in next time.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be, when you're doing a novel, it's more sort of continuous than that. You're not going to just say, okay, we're going to cut chapter here and I'm going to force you to take a week off reading until the next until the next week, and then we'll get another installment. It's not the same experience at all. But yeah, the heat map, as I call it, can be applied retrospectively. In fact, I think it's better if it's applied retrospectively, because it's one of those things that then helps you to structure the editing process. If you see that you've got too much red happening in the first half and then too much green happening in the second half, that tells you that your high stakes stuff is coming potentially a bit too early.
Yes.
And maybe you need to switch that around. Or at least look at how you can even it out. Doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
But get the first draft done without any of that faff. That's what I would.
I think I mean all of this I think is really interesting when we think about episodic writing, and I'm sure at some point we will talk about episodic writing. I know you do a workshop about episodic writing, so probably more on that later. But
yeah,
Rachel, I mean, is that a sort of technique or bit of planning or editing that you applied in your short story cycle?
Yeah, I think it is. Less of the episodic writing in the novel history way. So when we're talking about Wilkie Collins, Dickens, the Strand magazine, how that was episodic writing. They did need you to go, oh my God, I have to come back for the next one. Longer waits were more normal pre-Netflix, pre-downloads, really. Yes, I do, because although I completely take your point that there isn't quite the pressure that there might be with audio drama where you have to literally get them back, with prose writing comes not taking it for granted at the same time that I am, I suppose, through short stories and through chapters in novels, building the need to answer questions, even if they're not phrasing them as literal questions in their head, and sometimes they will be and sometimes they won't. You do need a sense that there is a story. I'm so sorry, Chris, I'm not doing this on purpose. You are on a journey, there is a destination. That if you don't feel like there is some sort of journey, if you don't feel like there is a destination to arrive at, even if the destination you actually end up at is a completely different one to the one that they're expecting, then you do lose momentum. You do lose a sense of there being rails under the train. So yes, I think you do, but I think it does come back to never feeling like you need to exposition your way through that I'm not going to sit there and go, what exactly am I doing, other than in thriller writing, which is what I'm doing right now. My coach encouraged me, and I have encouraged other people, it's a wonderful thing, is to know what active questions you're using in every single chapter. It does remind you what are the questions in your audience's head that they need answering, even when some of them are red herrings and some of them won't be answered till way later. You are still investing in that reader. I think any prose reader who takes it for granted that their reader is going to finish the book because they've started it hasn't met many humans. We've got to keep them wanting to come back.
Yeah. I think probably the final big question in this episode is it's one of planning versus editing, I think. And we've touched on this, but is adding the structure, adding the pace, adding the peaks and troughs, as you've described, Emily, adding the questions, is that best done in planning so that we write according to what we think we need for the story, or in editing? Or is it a combination of the two, and I guess in drafting as well? So, one other or both, do you think?
At the risk of trapped record, the most important thing is a writer does what feels interesting to them. Not I have to be interesting, but me being interested in what I'm doing. So it might be that you sit and plan every single thing, but you are kidding yourself if you think that's what the actual book is going to look like. You've got that plan in order that you can divert from it, you can deviate from it, you can learn about your world and create your world better. So as long as you understand that what you plan, the purpose of what you plan, is so that you can change from it and grow past it, absolutely fine. But I think the way that most of us waste the most time is thinking that planning is something you do like a crystal ball. It's not.
Listeners, you may just have heard a rather alarming loud noise in the background. That was thunder.
We promised this was thunder.
It wasn't me.
There was a moment there when Rachel was talking and there was a flash, and I was thinking, was that me? Did I blink weirdly? Or no, I'm kind of glad that was. So we
should. I mean, really, we should just segue straight into an episode about Gothic fiction at this point. But sadly, we are with pace and structure. But that certainly added a bit of unplanned pace into the discussion, I think. So if you hear any more of that, that's us recording live in a real front room.
Could I just say that in terms of sort of pace and structure, I think it comes from both. If you're telling a story, you know where it's going, you know the kind of story that you want to tell. Generally speaking, as you go through the story, it builds up pace and momentum.
Yes.
For me, at least, anyway. And then when it comes to editing, it's just making sure that all makes sense. So it is both first draft and edit, but it's always of the two. You're never going to write a perfect first draft. And I'm sorry, people who say, I write clean first drafts. Okay, well, there might be one in a million writers who can write a clean first draft and send it off to their editors, and it doesn't have inconsistencies and it doesn't have typos and it doesn't have... That's like saying, okay, there's, that's the number of violinists who never have to practice and pick up a violin and can suddenly play Vivaldi. It's not a fair aim. It's not a fair thing to try and aim for. Yes. It's always a combination of drafting and editing.
And as Douglas Adams so correctly pointed out, scientists have proved that the one thing nobody likes is a smart ass.
Yes. Yeah.
What a remarkably good point.
Yeah, I mean, there are those people in the world, but no one wants to hang out with them.
Yeah. Well, no, quite. Are there any examples that you'd like to share with us of books, scripts, films, TV shows, audio dramas that you think are very, very well either paced or structured, and probably both actually if they're very well structured?
Oof.
Lots and lots and lots. What do you want to do first?
Oh, I actually have this. I've got two. I wrote them down. This is very exciting for me. So, Northern Lights, Philip Pullman.
Yeah.
Looking back on that one, brilliantly structured book. Obviously first in a series, but it's also just very nicely constructed. The stakes raise and raise and raise, and then there's the pinnacle. It's a very nicely constructed book. Also, The Court of Broken Knives by Anna Smith Spark, really great book, and it's excellent in so many ways. But yes, the structure of that book is also fresh.
Chef's kiss.
Chef's kiss, that one. Yeah.
It sounded great on microphone, by the way.
Guess the sound effect.
There we go.
I am going to say two as well, but so many I want to mention, I can't mention them all. The Last Days of Jack Sparks by Jason Arnott. Supernatural thriller. Very, very funny. Very, very scary. And I am kind of harking back to the Nobody Likes a Smart Arse. It's that wonderful thing where you can see how a character is causing their own demise and you go along with it. And I'm not going to say anything more about that other than that I think it's paced exceedingly well. That's a real masterclass. Another one is that I also think I've not mentioned before is Lavie Taddar's The Big Blind, which opens with a poker game. And when you realise the young girl winning the poker game is a nun, and you work back through it and find why the nun is winning at poker. It is short, it is brilliant, and it plays every word perfectly like a poker game, and the pace and the structure reflect that.
Now, as always, we're going to end this episode with a writing challenge from Rachel. So, Rachel, what have you got for us about pace and structure?
Pick a cliffhanger. Pick a cliffhanger. Start at the end. I dare you to put aside every, but I need to know this and I haven't worked out that, and write the cliffhanger you want. Maybe it's the end of an episode, maybe it's the end of a chapter, maybe it's the end of the whole book and you're leaving us there hoping there's another one. Be absolutely forgiving of yourself, give yourself permission for everything, see what you come up with, and then work backwards. Yeah, excellent. We often say in workshops, cliffhangers don't necessarily need to involve
people called Cliff.
Or hanging off. Or coat hangers.
Cliffs.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily need to involve...
It's a very common misconception.
...action or coat hangers. Yeah. They can be emotional. So they can be an argument or a revelation or something like that.
Yeah.
Really,
Cliff needs to be really upset about something.
Yes, yeah. And hanging from something probably inappropriate to be hanging from.
He's emotional about hanging from whatever he's hanging from.
Yes. And that also depends on the genre.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I wonder whether that thunder has actually affected us slightly.
Yeah.
There we go. Pace, structure,
and
thunder
cliff.
and lightning and cliff. Rachel Knightley, Emily Inkpen, from this incident-packed episode of the Writers' Gym podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris Gregory.
Thank you for listening to the Writers' Gym podcast with Rachel Knightley, Emily Inkpen, and me, Chris Gregory. If you'd like to learn more about Rachel and the Writers' Gym, please go to rachelknightley.com. To find out more about Emily, please go to emilyinkpen.com. And for Chris, go to alternativestories.com. We'll print all these links and more in the show notes for this podcast. The Writers' Gym podcast is an Alternative Stories 2024 production for the Writers' Gym. Production, sound design and editing were by me, Chris Gregory.